All right, well, looks like we had a little bit of technical difficulties here. As said.
Well,
all right, I don't know what was going on there. We've had it said it was going, it said it wasn't going, whatever. We're here.
It went.
It is Selection Sunday, and it went, and it is happening. We now have the 3 teams that will be from the WCC who will be playing on selection or in March Madness in the NCAA tournament. That is the Gonzaga Bulldogs, the St. Mary's Gales, and the Santa Clara Broncos.
Can we boogie down?
I'm gonna let you go.
Down. Can we go down? Can you boogie on down? Let's go dancing, everybody. Get your dancing shoes on. Get yourselves to Portland. Get yourselves to OKC. Get yourselves to St. Louis. Oh, man. I mean, I'm going to be honest. There's nothing that really prepares you for getting the name called. You can sit here and you can say, act like you've been there before. Well, I haven't been here before. The last time Santa Clara made the dance, I was not alive. I was negative years old. And, I sit here. I don't even sit here as the podcaster. I don't even sit here as the journalist. I don't sit here as the broadcaster. I sit here as a damn proud alum right now. And that there was nothing that could have prepared you for the antsiness, the angst. You want the name to go. You want to avoid the first 4, the perilous first 4 in Dayton. And, it took some time. It did take some time. But eventually, in that Midwest region, Broncos' name got called. And, I mean, I didn't black out, but my neurons stopped firing in my brain right after that. I was just like, capture all the video you can, talk to all the players and coaches that you can, and just kind of soak it up for the moment that it was. So Santa Clara to the dance, St. Mary's to the dance, Gonzaga to the dance, and Seattle U to the NIT. So a massive credit to the Redhawks for doing that.
All right, I'm wondering what's going on with some of the tech today, because I see this one banner that is not the correct banner. Don't know what's going on. Apparently, StreamYard is also a little hungover from the selection show party as well. But yeah, when you hear the name for the first time, if it's a scenario like the Santa Clara fans have gone through the last X number of hours, it is unique. It is special. You can't replicate what that feeling is, especially when you're an at-large team. There's a little bit of the anticlimactic component if you are the auto bid, which obviously that means you put in the work and you won your conference championship, and that you celebrate that all night long when you win that. So it makes Selection Sunday itself it takes the edge off. When you're not necessarily sure that you're going to hear the name called, even if you think you're going to hear the name called, you start getting a little nervous at certain points. But Santa Clara hearing their nname called, I mean, even knowing St. Mary's was going to be in, the fact that we had to wait until the very last 14 queue was a little at least a small measure of nerve wracking of I haven't seen that 7 seed St. Mary's pop up, and there's only one of these 7 seeds left. But here we are. We have 3 teams that are going to be dancing in the WCC. Santa Clara will be taking on Kentucky. St. Mary's will be taking on Texas A&M, and Gonzaga will be taking on Kennesaw State. And on the first glance, I mean, I was feeling pretty good about all 3 of these in that first round matchup. Obviously, you start to kind of take a step back of what's then also the possibility of moving further along or whatever else. But I do kind of want to start. Let's talk about, because it does feel like it is the one that everyone's talking about is Santa Clara, because it is the first time in 30 years that the Broncos will be in the tournament. And a lot of people were liking Santa Clara as a potential upset, potential team that could get deeper into the tournament before any selections were made. And the fact that they drew Kentucky of all teams, honestly, it felt like everybody was jumping on that's the 7-10 upset that everyone has.
Give it to me right now. I want Kentucky. All right. I want Mark Pope, especially give me Mark Pope. I mean, Herb Sendek's got a 3-game winning streak on Mark Pope dating back to the time when Mark Pope couldn't even make the NCAA tournament in the WCC. I mean, that was a real pain state. The BYU Cougars were in and around the NIT, not making the postseason. There were some rough patches at times. And Herb Sendek, going back to Jalen Williams and Brandon Pajemski, has Mark Pope's number as of recently. So I posted a little clip online, of what happened the last 3 times the Broncos and the Cougars played, with Herb and Pope patrolling the sideline. And look, I mean, Mark Pope hasn't given me a real reason to believe, not really in his players, but really in him. I mean, nothing. He has not punched up in the SEC to the extent that the Kentucky standard is. And I mean, when you think of all the turmoil this season for Big Blue, I mean, they've been all over the place. And, some of that's a function of the health, obviously, without a shadow of a doubt. But when I look at this team as a whole, it's like, I mean, I don't see a reason why Santa Clara can't win this one. I really don't. And we think of the flat tires Mark Pope has had in the NCAA tournament, dating back to his time with the Cougars, starting to get back on the right track last tournament with the Wildcats and beating Troy and Illinois. I mean, Broncos got as good a chance as anybody to win to be an upset in this one. I know they're, I believe, anywhere between a 3 and 4.5 point underdog right now. But look, I mean, I'm going to ride with the Broncos till the wheels fall off. They can do this. They can absolutely send Big Blue home disappointed in St. Louis.
I think the one thing when I've thought about Santa Clara, especially over the last month or so, it's because of how deep the Santa Clara team is. It's like, this doesn't look like a team that is set up or just satisfied to get to the dance. It was very clear for a while that this was a team very capable of not only getting there, but then doing damage once they were there. We've talked kind of ad nauseum about like the different components that Santa Clara can bring. You think about the nights that Alan Graves can have, the nights that Sash Gavalugov can have, the nights that Elijah Mahi can have, the nights that Christian Hammond can have. And the fact that there are so many guys that can do it on a given night for Santa Clara obviously gives them a lot of punching power when you get to the dance. And you need more than a couple of options, because it makes you a lot harder to game plan for. And because Santa Clara has also had their fair share of success of lighting it up from 3, we know that if they have a good night from distance, there's very few teams that are going to be able to knock off this Santa Clara squad. And you talk about those ups and downs, and Santa Clara, I think, has for the most part avoided a lot of those ups and downs where, well, Kentucky that's kind of been their MO over the last couple of years, is just some high highs, but also some low lows. This is where Kentucky has, it really depends on which version of this team we are going to see coming into the NCAA tournament. Now, they did win a couple of games in the SEC tournament, beating LSU, beating Missouri before losing to Florida. But it really is going to determine upon which version of Kentucky we see. And to an extent also, like, what version of Santa Clara do we see? Like, if we see the version that played St. Mary's, I think they are going to, serve themselves really well. If we see more of the version that we saw in the second half against Gonzaga, it might be a little bit more of a struggle. But again, on paper, looking at this matchup, the second it popped up on the screen, immediately, I'm like, I'm picking Santa Clara. Like that, there was no hesitation of like, I'm taking the Broncos in that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is about March, and you mentioned like the options and stuff like that, and rightfully so. For me, it's about like tipping point players. And what I mean by that is kind of just really another phrase for X factors. And I look at it, I think Alan Graves is kind of too good to be an X factor anymore, just because of what he's been doing. But I'll point to him as kind of be a guy who can be a tipping point guy. But the one player who sticks out above it all, it's like Santa Clara will win the game. They can win the game because of him. And you saw it in Las Vegas, Sash Gavalugov. I mean, this is a player that, whether he rises up or doesn't meet it, is a player made for March. And I'm really excited to see what Sash Gavalugov can do in this tournament. And for me, I look at maybe down the line. Brent Napper hasn't had a season that he's wanted. Can this be a way to kind of send himself out as a senior going out the right way? Can he find a way to, get one into the tank and get one firing away from 3 or something like that? I mean, I look at Christian Hammond and Elijah Mahi. I think that's Kentucky's going to really try and key in on them and try and limit their effectiveness. And for me, it's going to be the other guys. What can Graves do? What can Gavalugov do? This could be, you know, there's going to be a lot of youngsters who are going to get tapped to do some big things in this game for one reason or another. So, in terms of not necessarily making predictions, but guys who will have to be ready when their number's called, I look at KJ Cochran and I look at Cherry Darlin. Like these are guys where you will be asked to do something, and it may be in a point of pain, and it does not matter. Like you are going to have to be the guy that bails out the Broncos for a couple minutes or even provide some timely buckets. So it's not necessarily about these X factor / tipping point players, but guys going on down the line. And that's kind of who I key on for the Broncos. And when I look at it going the other way for the Cats, for me, I look at the tipping point guys kind of being like Colin Chandler. He's one of their guards in the backcourt. Because I look at Otega Owe and Denzel Aberdeen. I look at those as the guys as the ones who you have to know who they are, where they are at all times. I look at a guy like Colin Chandler and is like, okay, if he's going, then Kentucky's going. And then that's a problem. Mo Diabate, I think he's someone who can be a real tipping point player, someone who has proven he can shoot the three ball at times. What version of Diabate do you get as a shooter? I think that's important. And when Kentucky has not won games, it's because their interior has been really soft. And if Santa Clara can bang bodies with them, win the rebounding battle, and eventually just kind of snatch their soul, I mean, I like where the opportunity can go for the Broncos, especially if they advance and move on and kind of see what happens going on elsewhere. They're in the quad that features Iowa State and Tennessee State. So I look at all that and I say, all right, sign me up. I mean, you can't run from the smoke in March Madness. And I think Santa Clara will be ready to go come Friday. And I know I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with you with Santa Clara. This is going to be an exciting run. Their game is on Friday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific time. They'll be on CBS, the first one of the day on Friday. So as you figure out ways to obviously do the full till day one of the tournament, day two of the tournament, get your coffee, get whatever you need ready and first thing in the morning, because it's going to be Broncos and Wildcats right there at the start of day two of the NCAA tournament. Now, to kind of stick to a little bit of a kind of happenstance possibility is that, well, Mark Pope's former team could end up facing a familiar foe as well, because BYU is in the same pod as the Zags in Portland. And those two are obviously like Gonzaga is the 3 seed in that pod. BYU is the 6, as BYU will await one of the play-in matchups, but Gonzaga is going to be taking on 14 seed Kennesaw State in Portland. And no real surprise that the Zags have ended up in Portland. No real surprise that they're a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, based on especially how they finished it off. And for this one, I mean, the Zags have proven themselves time and time again, especially in the first round, that they know how to kind of take care of business early in the NCAA tournament. But now one of the things that might be kind of a point of note with Kennesaw State is this is a team that averages the second most free throw attempts in the country at 27 per game. This is a team that rebounds the ball on the offensive end really well. And to an extent, offensive rebounding free throws. That's a team that sounds a bit familiar when it comes to teams Gonzaga has faced. Sounds a lot like St. Mary's. However, the one thing that is the biggest difference between Kennesaw and the Gales is, well, size. None of the rotation guys are taller than 6'9", and we know that the Zags are going to be relying upon that inside presence, a lot of it being Graham Ike. So, I mean, I'm not all too concerned about matchup one, and almost like I'm looking a little bit forward, potential second rounder where we could see a reuniting of the Zags and BYU in round 2.
I'm also kind of looking towards that. And I think the big thing for me with the Zags and Kennesaw State is the Zags like mental maturity and emotional maturity in this game, because I think Kennesaw State, when you look at kind of the story, everyone talks about kind of like storylines beyond the basketball. And I look, Kennesaw State and South Florida are one and the same in this regard, because they're both playing for Amir Abdur-Rahim, the former head coach who recently passed away. And I think you look at that, I think you look at an Owls team that's very inspired under Antoine Petaway. Petaway has explicitly mentioned that the Owls are kind of playing on the shoulders of Rahim, as someone who kind of led the Owls to the dance, had a chance to, I believe, to take down Xavier a couple years ago in the 3-14 matchup. And so I look at that, and I think for me, the essential question is, can the Zags not look forward? And I think Mark Few and company, Brian Michelson and company, they've done a great job over the years of focusing on the then and now. And if Gonzaga continues along that front, I think they will win against Kennesaw State. They don't have someone to match up against Graham Ike. It's someone where I would look for Graham Ike to kind of set the tone and say, look, this is going to be my NCAA tournament swan song. At minimum, we're going to go down with the way I set this tone. And I look at that against Kennesaw State. I think it's going to be more of the mental aspect and emotional aspect than just the pure basketball. And if Gonzaga can kind of keep that Kennesaw State like inspiration and emotion away, I think they'll move on. And when I look at BYU, the big thing is obviously AJ DeBonsa, and rightfully so. But BYU has kind of been Jekyll and Hyde when they haven't had Richie Saunders. And now you're going to be in a tournament setting where you're going to need that shooting. You're going to want that shooting. And Gonzaga has made a case for themselves as probably one of the best, if not the best, defensive team Mark Few has ever had. So when I look at that matchup, if Gonzaga wants to get all up in everybody else's grill and let AJ go to work, that might just work for them. And that might get them back to a Sweet 16. So I kind of look at that, and I think it's a tale of two different games. I think Kennesaw State's going to really be about the mental approach. And when I look at BYU, I think that's going to be about kind of how do you scheme out everybody else and trying to either go all in on going towards AJ or go all in on saying nobody else except AJ. So I look at all that, and I think those are going to be the fun things to watch because Kevin Young, he can scheme up a good offense, but I just don't know if he has the horses against Mark Few's defense this year.
I mean, with the defense that for this Zag team, I'm kind of looking at a couple of things. One, it's still the continued health of a Jalen Worley, because we did see him play in the WCC tournament, and he did start to look a little bit better. He didn't play a ton of minutes in either of the two games, but he was effective when he was out there. What percent of a Jalen Worley are we going to see in this first game? I think is going to be a telling sign. Press conference after the selection show today, Mark Few did talk about the injuries and did say that Worley's moving a little bit better, which obviously, considering he moved pretty well enough to play a week ago, bodes well that he's moving even better now as we're getting set for the NCAA tournament. And the other one is, again, now that it's tournament time, now that the bright lights have been turned on, I'm looking at Tyon Grant-Foster because this is the moment that you were brought in for. These are the games that when we looked at the way Gonzaga put this roster together in the offseason, that he was the one guy that we saw as the potential game changer for them. They had for a while been missing the guard who could take over a game, be that X factor, and really just kind of take over as needed. We've seen glimpses of that over the course of the season from Grant Foster. We saw him have a really good game in the championship game in Vegas. It not only on the defensive end, but on the offensive end, he had 20 points in that one. He was on the all-tournament team. It does seem like he's peaking at the right moment and for a team that is going to need him to play that way. It doesn't mean that he needs to drop 20 a night or anything like that, but he needs to be a factor on the offensive end on a night in, night out basis in the NCAA tournament if Gonzaga is going to get deeper into this. And honestly, when I saw the pod that they were in, we both had our questions about how far they could get without Braden Huff, but considering who they are in this 14 pod with, I'm feeling really good about the Zags being able to get out of the first weekend.
Yeah, they can absolutely do it. And I think you look at everything, all things considered. I mean, a Zag team that could end up back in the Bay Area, and we didn't kind of know the way things go in terms of the West Coast. Zag support even beyond the Spokane and beyond the Kennel. I expect a good crowd in Portland if they're so fortunate to move on. I expect a good crowd in San Jose. And I think when you realize that Braden Huff is at best potentially on the cards for the Sweet 16, I think it's good for the fact that you don't necessarily need to insert him now because Gonzaga's kind of found their way and found their identity without him, and it's going to be leaning into defense. And when you mentioned Tyon Grant-Foster, I share a lot of those sentiments in terms of he can't be variance Tyon like we've seen at times so far this season. They need the Tyon Grant-Foster that was like that in the WCC tournament, that was like that in all three matchups against Santa Clara. The Tyon Grant-Foster that gave Zach nightmares in Spokane a couple years ago. Like, it needs to be that Tyon Grant-Foster on 100 the whole time. And when I look at him, and you mentioned Jalen Worley, I think this week plus of rest is going to do him some good, kind of similar to what it was in the lead into the WCC tournament. I look at Emmanuel Innocenti, like this two-way impact cannot be understated in the NCAA tournament. And I look at him and I say, look, we know what you're going to bring on defense. But when I look at what he's done this season, and what stood out above all is his timeliness on some of his threes and on some of his offensive contributions. If you get more of that, I think that can be, he's a guy who I would quantify as, when the Zag offense is rolling, he can be the one that delivers kind of the backbreakers. And if Emmanuel Innocenti can kind of be the guy to be confident in this moment with his offense already coupled with his defense, I mean, you got yourself a second weekend team, and then who knows what could happen, especially if Braden Huff gets ramped up and ready to go. And if he does, I mean, I know I'm armchair coaching right now, but I would personally bring him off the bench. That's what I would do, kind of see how he would play out with that. But I'll let you have the floor with the rest of the Zag potentials.
I mean, the other thing that we haven't talked about yet, and we saw it firsthand in Vegas, was the impact that the two freshmen had, Davis Vogel and Mario Saint-Superi, because those two, again, they've had a lot of growth over the course of the season, and both of them have had, of course, as you would expect, some freshman ups and downs, first year ups and downs, but they showed up when the pressure was highest and the lights were brightest in Las Vegas in the championship game against Santa Clara. Saint-Superi, like he looked all of the potential that I think the Zags thought he would have coming into the year. He had it on the offensive end, he had it on the defensive end. And Davis Vogel, like, he felt like he was the closer in that game. Like, he was the one who came on late and shut the door against Santa Clara. And I don't think that these are going to be moments that those two are going to shy away from. They're not going to, I don't think they're going to shrink in those moments. And I think the development of those two is going to be critical in this first round, and maybe not necessarily against Kennesaw, but if they can start to show that consistency against a BYU, get them to the second weekend, and then you kind of start to look at, like, well, who knows? You get by that first weekend, you get to that second round matchups, and you know what? We know that it can all start to go different ways, because Purdue is the one sitting on the other side right now. Miami and Missouri are also in there, and that Purdue team is going to be a rough go no matter who ends up getting them, assuming they get to the Sweet 16 and get to the second weekend, which, after seeing them take care of Michigan earlier today, like, well, I would probably say safe bet that it's going to be Purdue in the Sweet 16. But of course, this tournament, you never know. But I'm looking at those two freshmen. I mean, it almost in my head, it's the only thing that's going to prevent the Zags from getting to the second weekend is the Zags themselves, because they have the pieces. It's a matter of just putting it all together, and we know they're capable of doing it.
Yeah, and I'll start by saying I'll take Queens to knock off Purdue, just like FDU knocked off Purdue a couple years ago. So we'll start with that. Gonzaga will have the leverage heading into the Sweet 16. We'll see how that goes. But when I look at that, there's a lot to like, if I'm being honest. I mean, imagine the storylines if you get Tommy Lloyd versus Mark Few in the Elite Eight. Yes, please sign me the hell up right now. I will take all of that because that's when you kind of look at the crossroads of, like, the different eras within Gonzaga under Mark Few, and essentially you get to kind of feel the Tommy Lloyd impact kind of firsthand, because while Gonzaga's still been a really good team, I mean, Tommy Lloyd and company, I mean, they were killing the game when he was patrolling the sidelines in Spokane, and were year in, year out top 5 team. So I look at that. I think that's going to be a cool crossroads game if we get it. We'll kind of see how far each team kind of goes in that regard. And I do want to shout out what you mentioned about the freshmen, because the first sample size in Vegas was really good from them. And I don't want to say that it's an immediate telltale sign of what you're going to do in the NCAA tournament for what you do in a conference tournament, but it's a neutral site setting. And you're kind of, that's the first time where you're kind of, I guess, technically a fish out of water, because you've never been through that process before. And yes, while they have the home crowd there, maybe it'll be a little bit less pronounced. So in the NCAA tournament, you just see the lines are a little bit different. It's still the same court, but the lines are different. They're painted. You see the March Madness logos. You see the city that you're in. You kind of feel the moment, if you will, as you walk into the tunnel and walk into the locker rooms. So I think that part's gonna be a little bit different. But when I look at like the first immediate sample size from the freshmen, passed with flying colors so far. Davis Wogo, Mario Sensuperi. I mean, it's exactly what you want to see. They didn't shrink when the moment called for it because the Zags needed them against the Broncos in that WCC championship game. So I'm really intrigued to see how kind of when the lights get even brighter, can they continue to kind of rise their game to the occasion and eventually get the Zag fans another run in their WCC swan song as they go dashing in the dance.
And of course, like Zags will be in Portland. They will play on Thursday. They are the nightcap in the Rose City, 7 p.m. on TBS. And that leaves us with the third WCC team that will be playing. Now they're playing first of the three this week. They'll be on Thursday at 4:35. St. Mary's will be heading to Oklahoma City to take on Texas A&M. And it is a city that St. Mary's is familiar with. It's been a long, long time since they've been there. This was the site of their first NCAA tournament berth under Randy Bennett way back in 2005 when they played Miami. Now they were the 10 seed in that tournament. But looking at this individual matchup, like kind of doing the quick homework on Texas A&M and what they're going to be able to bring. Honestly, like the pieces and the style looks kind of similar to Santa Clara in a lot of ways. 87 points per game. They make 10 threes per game, hit 10 threes per game. They're going to try to control tempo running up and down the court. This A&M team has also won its first tournament game each of the last few years. And so this is a program, even though, yes, new head coach, not one that's unfamiliar with early tournament success. So while I do look at this game as a match, because again, St. Mary's has also handled its early tournament business as well over the last few years. This is going to be a challenge, but I don't think it's going to be a style of play that St. Mary's is totally unprepared for, albeit there's going to be definitely some key matchups to watch. The backcourt, just kind of staring at some of those, looking at, I think I just wrote down the note. Rylan Griffin and Mikey Lewis going back and forth, I think is going to be a fascinating watch.
Yeah, it will be. And I think the thing is when you look at WCC, SEC on paper at face value, you're like, okay, this is going to be a physical matchup. It's going to be war in the paint. Not necessarily the case here in this one, because I kind of look at Bucky Ball, Bucky McMillan, the head coach for Texas A&M. I look at Bucky Ball, and that's kind of like I guess it's kind of a split off from SEC play, kind of trying to make his system work in the SEC, and he's kind of had some varying success levels in that regard this season. I think kind of similar to Kentucky, some ups, some downs, but eventually I think Texas A&M is on the right foot. And I think you mentioned it earlier, but it's pace, pace, pace. Who controls it? Who just kind of keep the lid on the other team's offense? And I look at Texas A&M. I think the key film to watch is that where it went really
right as you were getting to that. All right, go again. We lost you for a second.
Damn it. Okay. The key film to watch is that Samford versus Kansas 4-13 game from a couple years ago. That's when you kind of get a real look at what Bucky Ball is like. And when I kind of look at it, it's not chaos offense, but it's definitely something where no plays off, no matter what position you play. And I think one of the big keys is how are Harry Wessels and Andrew McKeever in space? Because I think that's something where it's been a pressure point this year, both against the Zags and against the Broncos. And when you look at the way Bucky Ball kind of moves, the way it snaps around, and when it's working at its peak, it's going to require them to work. And I'm talking about work and rotation, work and recovery and scrambling. And I think that's going to be the big deal. How do the St. Mary's centers look defensively more than anything? Because at times this year, it's been rough. It really has. And it's not a standard that Randy Bennett and company have been accustomed to. And when I look at the adjustment into this NCAA tournament, who can set the tone in terms of pace and tempo, like you mentioned? Is it going to be Bucky Ball? Is it going to be the St. Mary's physicality? And do they kind of reach back into the well of a couple seasons over the last couple seasons where they slow it down just to snail's pace? This St. Mary's team is a little bit faster compared to years past, as everybody knows. But do you kind of pull the ropes back a little bit and say, look, we're good at that, but that may not be our recipe for this one?
That's almost where the importance of Josh Dent comes into play in this game, because the sophomore guard is going to be kind of the the one leading the charge here, and he's going to need to control that pace and make sure that obviously the St. Mary's offense is in where they need to be, but not get sped up. And that is going to be one of the great challenges for this squad, because I think we've seen it a couple of times this year where St. Mary's has gotten sped up. You could point to maybe the game at Santa Clara. You could point to the game against Vanderbilt where St. Mary's got sped up more than they would have liked, and that really, really hurt them. So if you look at what Josh Dent is going to be able to do, he did not have a good outing in the WCC tournament, so he's going to want to make good on that. What they're going to be able to do on that, what he's going to be able to do, what he's going to be able to bring, is going to be critical. And you're right, the centers, that could potentially be a problem. And I don't know if there is a trick up the sleeve about going small as needed, because if those centers get run off the court, or it's just try to double down and really, to your point, slow this thing down even more. Now, I do think that you mentioned all of that. It's going to be critical for the St. Mary's defense to really work on that perimeter and guard the perimeter well, like they, for the most part, have done this season. Now, against Santa Clara the other night, did not work out so well for them, but traditionally, St. Mary's has been a very good three-point defensive team, so they know how to chase guys off the three-point line, make those shots difficult. I do look kind of some of the supporting cast to step up in this one. You are going to need a good outing from Dylan Shaw. You're going to need a good outing from a Rory Hawk. I think you're going to need a good outing from a Montes Uzenis. You're going to need, I think, these guys to step up coming off the bench and give some guys some reprieve. We were talking a little bit about we need to see Paulos Morauskas be the good Paulos Morauskas, not the one that we've seen disappear in some of these larger games. I mean, specifically Gonzaga, because he played really well against Santa Clara. It was the games against Gonzaga where we've seen that be a little bit more of a struggle. So does St. Mary's need to play its best? I think it's a little closer to their best in this version of the Gales. But I do think that, unlike maybe the last few years, the upside to this team is a potential second weekend type talent, because I look at the Mikey Lewis factor here. Because if we get the good Mikey, like we have seen the last 3 weeks or so, that's a guy who can take over a tournament game. That's a guy who can become a star in March. And I don't think we didn't see that as much in last year's team. I think there was any number of factors you could point to why the last year's St. Mary's team had its limitations and was only going to kind of go so far. But this one, the youth of this team has been good at times and has been a challenge at times. They do need to prove themselves away from UCU Pavilion. It's been kind of hit and miss on the road, hit and miss in neutral sites, and they're going to need to get off to a good start. I think in this one, I don't know if this team is going to be as well equipped to be able to kind of make a comeback. But if they get out in front or are able to play front runner, I think that's going to suit them best.
Yeah, and I think kind of when we go back to even the Zag discussion of how their youth plays, I remember going back to the WCC tournament preview. I said the key for St. Mary's is how would their youth play, and Dylan Shaw, it didn't work for him. Josh Dent, it mostly didn't work for him. Rory Hawk and Montes Uzenis, they didn't have enough time to make impact like that. And so when you mentioned a reprieve in the NCAA tournament, I think it's got to be more than those guys who pack a punch and don't have their stats kind of represented across the box score. I kind of look at it as Montes Uzenis versus Gonzaga at UCU. Like, we need your shooting. We need all the offense we can bring to the table, because Texas A&M is going to bring it. And I look at who knows what's going to happen when we just mentioned those aforementioned youthful players in Shaw, in Hawk, in Dent, in Lewis, really, for that matter, too. Kind of what does that look like when they kind of have to be told to rise to the occasion? I mean, we kind of mentioned the leadership, and St. Mary's players have taken the onus on them over the years. But despite all that, I mean, Harry Wessels is the lone senior. Everyone's going to be looking to him if things get bright-eyed, if things get blurry, if the lights get bright and things are getting tough and it's a one-possession game with 2 minutes to go. They're going to look at Harry Wessels to kind of steer the ship, even if he's not necessarily making the plays. So I look at all that. The youth was something that really, it didn't help St. Mary's. in Las Vegas. And that was kind of one of those first neutral site tastes. You think of the battle for Atlantis earlier on in the season, as you mentioned, like some games got away, other games where they were able to kind of take control. You think of the way they kept Virginia Tech down for the most part versus the way it got away versus Vandy. For me, I think the swing factor in this is Dylan Shaw, because it's going to have to be two-way impact. The way that you have to guard against Texas A&M and the way that he was basically a non-factor on offense versus Santa Clara, it just can't be anything like that against Texas A&M. So yes, you mentioned Josh Dent, and rightfully so, but I think Rory Hawk can kind of help out in that regard should he struggle, especially come defensively. So I look at Dylan Shaw and saying, look, I understand we've put a lot on your plate, and Randy Bennett has acknowledged as much, but there's no time to think about that right now. We need you right now, and especially if they can find a way through Texas A&M, it does not get easier. Dylan Shaw is going to have to be asked to do even more against a potential matchup in Houston.
This is St. Mary's 5th straight NCAA tournament. They have won their first round game in 3 of the last 4 years. The one loss coming back in 24 in Spokane. So St. Mary's, I mean, again, this coaching staff, they've done a really good job of getting out of the first round. Now, second round, totally different animal. There's potential second round could be Houston, which is not necessarily a great one to be seen on paper, but of course we'll talk about that a little bit more if that does end up being the matchup, which would be on Saturday from Oklahoma City, and then a potential opportunity to keep Houston away from playing in Houston for the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, because that is where the regional would be. But also that is the location of the last time St. Mary's reached the Sweet 16 was Houston. So maybe some cosmic karmic happenings with the Gales in this slate of the tournament. So one note I actually did see, it's kind of the funny note that I saw about the Western NCAA tournament teams that have reached the 5 most Western teams that have made the tournament are either coached by Randy Bennett, someone who looks like Randy Bennett, or was on Randy Bennett's coaching staff. So I mean, Herb, we've got Mick down in LA, and then of course Hawaii and Cal Baptist head coaches Oran Ganat and Rick Roy, who were both on Randy Bennett's coaching staff in Moraga. So just kind of a fun tournament note that I stumbled across.
You know, honestly, I feel like we underrate Randy Bennett's coaching tree. I mean, it goes without saying kind of what he does himself in Moraga, and kind of the Herb Sendek mentioned it in Las Vegas, kind of the pedestal that Randy Bennett stands on. And in his 20 plus years at the helm of St. Mary's, like there's so much uniqueness to doing it the way that he's done. And now you're starting to see it kind of get sprinkled over. Hawaii making their first dance in a decade. Rick Croy finally getting over the hump in the WAC tournament to lead CBU in what was a hell of a game in the WAC tournament championship against Utah Valley. And, you know, lest we forget to drop this other part of the news, not to make this more serious than it is, but Justin Joyner, you know, coming back out west, going to be the head coach at Oregon State. So I think you look at it. Yes, you mentioned the point of, you know, Mick Cronin and everybody else, and Herb Sendek. Mick Cronin, on the funniest coach I've ever been in a press conference with, bar none. Funniest thing you'll ever see in your life. I know not for everyone's taste, but I love it. It's super funny. But when you kind of tease everything else, and you mentioned the Randy Bennett coaching tree, I think it's important to mention, like, it's as underrated and underappreciated, I think, as it gets.
Kyle Smith, Todd Golden, adding just a couple more to that tree. I mean, Kyle Smith, the first part of that tree when he took over Columbia, and then was able to head out to Washington State, took them to a tournament now at Stanford. The coaching tree that Randy Bennett has built is a unique one, and clearly has a lot of success, and it's happening at a lot of smaller programs, maybe on some undersold programs. And I think there's something to be said about that. And of course, obviously St. Mary's being one of, at the time, definitely one of those undersold programs way back when. So yeah, there's a lot to look at with that coaching tree, and just the success that Randy has had over the years. And of course, like, look at the coach, just looking at his assistant coaching staff right now, like I could very easily see there's 2 more head coaches in the wings just sitting on that bench right now. But the 3 WCC teams that have reached the NCAA tournament, 2 of them start on Thursday, 1 starts on Friday. but they are not the next WCC team to be in action this week. The next one is going to be the one that reached the NIT, and that was the Seattle U Redhawks, as they will be taking on why I saw it. I created the graphic and now I'm
St. Thomas.
blanking. St. Thomas. I knew like St. Thomas. They'll be hosting that game first round of the NIT on Tuesday. And I mean, we talked about it in kind of like our sign off with Seattle U after the WCC tournament, or during the WCC tournament, is that this team deserved another opportunity to play. And the work that they had done, the work and the job that Chris Victor and his staff had done to put this team in position, 20 wins, and they're going to get a shot. And honestly, like, they are going to be a team that, after kind of going through the WCC schedule for the first time, I think they'll be ready to go for the NIT. And I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if we see them be able to kind of get a game or two here and be able to make it interesting in the NIT.
Yeah, no, I think the Redhawks can make a run. And I think, at least for me, I look at Braden Maldonado and trying to not necessarily right the wrongs, but kind of go out on his own terms. Because you look at the WCC tournament, he just didn't shoot the ball as well as we expected, and I'm sure as well as he expected. So I look at him and it's like, okay, look, it's literally now or never. My career will literally be over if things do not go well in a certain NIT game. I think the Redhawks can make a run, because I mean, you look at defense. It's really for the better part of this season, teams have been put in 40 minutes of hell against the Redhawks. It is not easy to formulate consistent offense against Seattle U. So I massive credit to Chris Victor and company for being as consistent as they are. Because, while at times they did lose some close ones in conference play this year, I mean, this is a team that's going to be on the up and up. That's going to be, I think, contending to be a high seed in the WCC tournaments to come. They can easily be a top 3 team and join St. Mary's, Santa Clara, and be in the fight with USF and going forward. So I look at that and I'm like, this is a good proving ground opportunity to kind of take that next step, admittedly with some of the veterans who probably were in their last swan song. But I think this is a good proving ground to kind of uplift yourself going forward. And the other thing, this is not official because the Crown Tournament bracket still has to come out, but I sincerely hope it's not the end for Pacific. I thought they were deserving of an NIT bid. I thought they were deserving. I think if the CBI was going this year, unfortunately got canceled, I think they would have been the CBI. But it's getting to be close on terms of what Pacific is going to have the potential to do. But I had hoped the Tigers would get something, but I'm not so sure they're going to get it. And if that is the case, that is unfortunate. That was a team that I think was worthy of doing so. And I think a massive credit to the Tigers for their growth, similar to the Redhawks this season, if that is indeed the end of the road this year.
Yeah, I mean, the NIT is looking like the Mountain West Invitational right now. It's like you've got a bunch of the teams from the Mountain West playing in there this year. Now, Seattle U, again, opportunity. They win their first game. They play the winner of Auburn, South Alabama. And so, again, there's been a ton of conversation about Alabama or Auburn over the last couple of weeks, whether they should have been in or out, and of course they rightfully were left out of the tournament. They had no business being in the NCAA tournament. But then that South Alabama team sitting there, it's like, that's a familiar name too, because they went up to the hilltop and took care of business.
Yeah, I mean, I look at South Alabama. They're such a chaotic team, because I just mentioned right now 40 minutes of hell with Seattle U. Try 40 minutes of zone against South Alabama. I mean, I remember having to cite them when they played North Texas before preparing for Santa Clara UNT back in December. And I mean, the amount of threes that South Alabama makes you jack up, there's a chance where they're the ones advancing and going to the Red Hawk Center to play Seattle U. I think there's a great chance of it, especially if we don't know what Auburn's motivation will be. And I think Seattle U, you don't want to look ahead, because St. Thomas is a very capable team and one that is really starting to ascend in their first couple of years at the D1 level. But you get past them, I mean, there's a world where you're hosting second round games, and who knows what happens on the other side of the bracket with some of the other conference teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll just be fun to be able to see like Seattle U play one more game, be able to see Will Heimbrodt one more time, be able to see Braden Maldonado one more time, be able to see just what the Seattle U team can do. Because I think like the one thing that always seemed, even when Braden Maldonado was out for a few games, like they were greater than the sum of their parts. Like it always felt like that they were they you looked at the individual talent, and while it may not have kind of jumped off the screen, collectively they were always a tough out in the WCC. And we saw it even in the WCC tournament. They won their first game and then just gave Pacific hell all the way through before the Tigers were able to knock them out. But it's going to be a lot of fun to see them on Tuesday night against St. Thomas. Again, a very capable, very good St. Thomas team going to the Red Hawk Center. So that'll be a lot of fun to see them at least one more time. Hopefully we do see CLU advance in the NIT. So hopefully we do hear some news about a couple of other teams. Yes, you mentioned the Crown. Their tournament is going to be, they're going to break out that bracket in the next day or so. So we'll see what happens. If there's any other WCC teams, if Pacific gets a call, I don't know if Oregon State's going to get that call, or even if they would actually accept that bid, even if they did. No. But who knows? We'll ask, but we'll find out in the next day or so. In the meantime, we are heading toward the NCAA tournament, which is going to be heading to obviously Oklahoma City for St. Mary's, Portland for Gonzaga, and then St. Louis for Santa Clara. And any final words before we wrap this up, because it is tournament week, it is March. I'm already starting to figure out my plans of where I'm going to be able to watch every single game starting from 9 a.m. until like 10 p.m. at night.
I know where I'm going to be. I'll be going to St. Louis. All right. I'm ready to go. I will be there on site, in person, ready to go and try and figure things out. I'm really intrigued to see the level of Broncos fans that make the trip out there. I know there's going to be a lot of contingent of Big Blue that makes their presence known in St. Louis, not too far away from Lexington. But really excited because it's one of those things where I sit here starry-eyed getting ready to walk into downtown St. Louis. I don't know what to expect, but all I know is that the aura of March Madness awaits, and I can't wait to dance and keep up with the rest of the WCC schools that are also going on. So I'm ready. I'm really excited. Really, really excited.
The one thing I'll say, and of course this is true, and you can see it through the screen, whenever the lower seed starts to play well, whenever there's the chance that they could pull the upset, we start to see it rev up. We start to see the crowd turn to the side of the underdog. So if Santa Clara can get it going and really kind of stay with the Wildcats throughout the course of that game, or even obviously start to pull away, the crowd will start to become heavily favored on the Santa Clara side. So that is always one of the big fun factors of the NCAA tournament. And I'm going to love watching that one, because obviously like a bunch of us are thinking that, yeah, Santa Clara is going to win this game. You think it, I think it. And this one is is the one I think everyone's penciling in. Definitely I still have to go over the whole bracket and start making my picks. So I got to organize the office pool and do all of that and get that all set up. So that's probably my task after this recording, is going to do that and making sure we're all set to go. My 4-year streak of winning was snapped. I have to get back into the win column this year.
I don't even know how you win those things, because I mean, you think of all the fickleness of March Madness, but look, you mentioned Santa Clara, like being the underdogs. Like, look, they may be the betting underdogs at anywhere from like 2.5 to 4.5, but trust your eyes. My eyes trust me that Santa Clara can get the job done against Kentucky. I think my eyes trust me that Gonzaga can be a Sweet 16 team. My eyes trust me that St. Mary's can beat Buckyball, and then they're going to meet their physical match in Houston. So I look at this, and, I appreciate everyone tuning in for this live edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. But time to get dancing, time to get on the road, time to make some travel plans. As Herb Sendek mentioned, talk to your travel agents. I'm going to go do that. It's going to cost me a lot of money. That's okay. It's the first time in 30 years, and we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for watching, everybody. We will be obviously back later in the week to talk about the recaps. Hopefully we're talking about second round games for each of these teams later on into the weekend. So follow along on social media at unofficial WCC pod. Subscribe to the podcast, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you listen to the show. That is Thomas. I'm Zach. Thanks for watching, everybody. It's dance time. It is March Madness, and we will catch you later.